Hello and welcome to the Enquiry podcast. This is a place where we are going to dive into everything that it is to live your life as medicine. So how to follow the breadcrumbs and the signposts in order to be guided to your purpose and to your freedom. How to use your life's challenges as the opportunities that they are for your own healing and growth. My name is Nerida Mills. I am your host. I am a psychosomatic practitioner. I am a coach, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here. I am very excited to get this party started. So let's get going. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enquiry podcast. I am very excited to have Christy Foster here with me today. I am sharing her wisdom with you guys. I met Christy doing my Masters of Psychosomatic therapy a couple of years ago now. Can't remember what year that was, a few years ago now, and was blown away at her grace and her expertise in this field. And so I'm really, really happy that you've agreed to come on and speak to my people. And yeah, why don't we start by giving us a bit of an introduction about yourself?
Okay, well, thank you, Nerida, for having me on. Introduction. Well, I've been doing body work, craniosacral work, and structural integration work for almost 30 years now. This is going on that, so it's been a long time. I was introduced to psychosomatics in 2014 and incorporated that into my practice and also teach psychosomatics. It is a love of mine. Obviously, because I'm still doing it, and a passion to share that with people so they can integrate it in whatever it is they do. Because I don't think it matters what people do for a living or whether they work for a living. We are always relating with someone, and how we relate internally shows a lot of that externally. And that's what I love about psychosomatics and body work, is it helps us have a better knowing of who we are and how we're relating.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's certainly been fundamental for myself in that regard, specifically.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. What got you into this work?
Well, when I was 18, 19 years old, very young, and I had went to beauty school and I was doing hair and started getting a lot of migraines and different they were panic attacks. I didn't know at the time that was a thing.
Yeah.
All I knew is I still functioned, but I was not okay. And one of my clients said, "You need to go see this gentleman." And so I went because I didn't have any money or health insurance. And so I went to see him, and he had me lie down on a table, put his hands on my belly, and started to talk to me. And I had a pretty massive emotional release on the table, which I was really surprised because I didn't know what was happening, what I was doing. And then I left, and for a couple of days, I was crying a lot. And this is the weird part about my brain, Nerida. I was so intrigued because all I could think of was, okay, so he didn't do anything but touch my belly because I didn't know anything. And I started, because he was an owner of a massage school at that time. And so I started school like in the next couple months after that because I was so interested. And I do believe that was a turning point. And I started school. I really began to understand more about the why. And then I went on to take quite a few more trainings, went to university and got a bachelor's in psychology. And I use that quite a bit. I come from a fair amount of trauma in that culturally things happened that were challenging. And I realize now so much of the work that I've been drawn to is to heal those pieces within me and create a better understanding for myself and then that gives me a much broader container to hold for other people, because most of the people that I see, a vast majority, are not aware that there is traumatic events that have happened a long time ago that are still affecting them today.
Yes.
And what I learned from that experience was I still have pieces come up. And through the work now, I understand better how to sit with it, how to resource myself. So it's been kind of a full circle of not knowing anything to coming into being able to be that resource for myself and for others now.
Beautiful. And it's what I just want to touch on something that you said, which was that because I think a lot of people come into the healing arts for that same reason, right? There's something within themselves that they want to understand, that they want to heal, they want to reconcile or love. Probably don't put it in that language initially; it's fix, right? But you mentioned that your capacity to be able to help people in that space has increased based on your own work and your ability to sit with these parts of yourself, which I 100% agree with from my own experience as well. What do you, can you explain a little bit more about how that works for people?
Like how it works when they come in for a session,
Or
or
how it works as in when we work on ourselves, how that actually increases the capacity for helping other people.
well, I believe how it works, Nerida, is we experience what is being held.
Mm.
And once we can experience that charge, because it comes in as a charge. And I think the most important part is our brains do not think, oh, that happened 20 years ago. Our bodies don't think that. Our bodies, when something comes back up, the body sees it in present time and experiences it again in present time as if it's happening again.
Hmm.
So as we move away from that charge, literally what happens, I believe, is your capacity internally expands, and I have a deeper understanding of what that is in my own expansion. So when I am with someone, that capacity is greater because I have felt the uncomfortableness, and I can sit with that without needing to fix anything.
Yeah.
And more of it's being a witness to what is and making that same type of room for that charge to move out of a human being.
Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely. It's like what I'm hearing, and yeah, I've read some stuff by a guy called Robin Grill, which is really interesting as well, because he talks about parenting specifically and childhood development. And he goes into, when we're activated by the behavior of a child, it's because the child is demonstrating a behavior that caused us pain in some way, shape, or form when we were children. And so their behavior is reactivating that emotional state within us. And so because we have yet to deal with that emotional state, or that the fear around the hurt, then we have a tendency without awareness to project and to try and minimize the child rather than deal with our own emotional state, right? So it's doing that, dealing with that emotional state within, so that with clients, as opposed to children, with clients, that we're able to actually sit with that without being fearful of it.
Right.
Amazing. I love that.
And I think more that people can, and I use the word practice because it is a practice, sitting in that uncomfortable state and practicing being an observer in that state versus the judgmental observer of, I must be broken, something's wrong with me. But to understand it's a part of the weaving that creates who we are. And I think it's really, really challenging to, if you haven't ever done that, to begin to do that work, because it's vulnerable. Sometimes it can be really scary when we bring that into consciousness, the charge of whatever that memory was in the body. But as as we continue to do that, our capacity to live life is much easier because we're not reacting to life like a child or, someone driving in front of us or a client or a parent. We're much more able to settle into what is around us and observe it, which is much healthier than reacting to it, because that's what continues to keep us in that fight or flight mode, which is what creates sickness in the body. And there's so much research now done around that, finally, that people are understanding that there's more accountability, inner accountability, to do some of that work so we can live a healthier life.
Yeah. It's a lot more freeing, right? I found for myself, the expansion that comes from being okay with that, like increased capacity. That increased capacity just allows for space where it used to be heavy. And so it feels like freedom, because there's nothing weighing down, holding us down. And so I know that you do a lot of work in regards to archetypes as well. And I was wondering if you could share like some of your favorite things about working with the archetypes. Because I think, again, psychosomatics is a great pathway here in regards to parts of self and looking at that relationship within. So what is it that draws you to archetypes? What's your favorite thing? Share with us your passion.
Where do I start? It is, I have such a love for archetypes and understanding patterns. I really believe my brain is put together that way, because it's simple for me. And I understand it. So I'll give you a really basic overview of the 4 survival archetypes. And Carolyn Mace is one of I would say, the queen of this work of the 4 survival archetypes, because these patterns show up in our body and they show up in our psyche. So it's both, which is why it's important to understand both. So if we start with the 4, and you think of it like a table, there's 4 legs on a table, and every human being has the patterns of the 4. And an archetype is a pattern of energy. Archetypes are neutral. They're not part of a personality. They're a pattern that we carry. And Dr. Carl Jung is the one who first came up with these 4 and really helped us understand what happens in the psyche when these are activated. And Carolyn Mace's work pulled in a lot of, okay, when they're activated, what do we do with that? So that's kind of the basis for the patterning of it. The easiest way for me to describe this is like, if you think of The Wizard of Oz. Most everyone have seen that show. The Wizard of Oz holds all of the archetypes of our psyche in that show. So they're symbols of us. So Dorothy is the child archetype. Dorothy she's seeing somewhere over the rainbow, and hers was more about belonging.
Yeah.
Right? Every child has a wound. All of us have been a child. And every child has a gift, and sometimes many gifts. And so in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is swept up in the house, which is a symbol for transformation and change. And then she lands in Oz, and we see the different aspects. So the lion is one of the 4 survival archetypes, which is the victim archetype. And in that, if you remember the lion, there was a lot of fear about him finding his voice, right? And he would make himself small, and he would take his tail and swirl his tail and kind of hold back. Yeah. So that's also one of the body archetypal patterns, is the pulling back, the voice, not standing up for oneself. It's almost like becoming invisible.
That decompression, right?
Yes, and shutting down.
Yeah.
And one of the most important parts about the archetype is to understand when you're in the shadow of the archetype. And when I say shadow, what that means is it's an unseen part of us. Because sometimes we have something happen, we can feel victimized in it, and sometimes we are victim to it. So I'm not negating that. An example of, someone did something to you and you felt victimized. And some of the language of the victim archetype is, this isn't fair. Why did this happen to me? No one ever helps me. And when we notice, can begin to notice that language in your head, to be able to pause and come back into your body and interrupt that loop of the victim. And however you do that, it can be a deep breath, it can be leaning against a tree, it can be feeling the earth under your feet, but to come back into the body versus the loop. And the victim goes to warrior, from victim to victorious. What is one choice you could possibly make to pull out of that loop of victim into a different choice? And it can be so simple. It could be like getting a drink of water or going to the bathroom or having something healthy to eat. Because sometimes we perpetuate our own victimhood.
Yeah.
By saying, no one ever listens to me, I have to do everything, it's not fair. And sometimes in codependent relationships, we're waiting for someone else to meet our need. It's a good example of victim archetype. It can be really challenging if you're unaware that that's part of your archetype. That's the shadow aspect.
You can also feel victimized by your victim, right? Like, I know I've definitely been there. When my victim comes up, sometimes, particularly in the past when I wasn't friends yet with my victim, I would then feel victimized by the fact that I felt like a victim.
Yes.
And down the rabbit hole we go.
And that's the loop in the mind.
Yeah.
And those neural pathways in our brain are so strong. And that's the key piece. So if you can understand that it is a loop and we can interrupt the loop, that's the biggest thing and there's so many ways we can interrupt it, but we're the only ones that can interrupt it. And that's where we find our courage.
That's the worry.
To choose something that is a resource for us, so we can step into some type of repair from whatever we felt victim about. And sometimes it's way more complex than that. A lot of times it isn't. I think that the most challenging part is to acknowledge and be aware that, yeah, we all do that.
Yeah.
And how can I better see that in myself, and how does it show up physically and in my head? What are the statements that come with that victim archetypal pattern?
Yeah.
And so those two, we have the child. Well, I didn't talk about child, did I? So child. So we see Dorothy, we see the victim archetype in her. I'm going to come back to Dorothy at the end. And then the scarecrow. So the scarecrow holds the saboteur archetype. Saboteur being the pattern that we all have, again, Nerida, of I don't know, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough certificates, I don't have enough college, I don't have enough money. There are things that we tell ourselves that aren't true. A lot of it has to do with speaking what's true and trusting our intuition, trusting what comes to us. Because if you remember the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, he's all over the place, right? I don't know. And there's a high level of anxiety because he didn't trust his knowing. He didn't trust his mind or his heart. And slowing down in that process, because we see him in the show as very active and activated all the time. And in panic mode, right? He's running, gets caught on fire, his straw gets blown away. There's all these different things that are always happening. And part of the saboteur pattern is also drama.
Interesting.
There's always something, right, that keeps me from having, doing, or being blank. And I can't because of, and then whatever the list is. And so it reinforces the belief that I can't have, do, or be that because look at this list over here of stuff that's always happening.
Mm.
And so, and with that, bringing it back to the body, how I see that as someone that tends to have high anxiety and a high level of mental, I call it mental masturbation. That's probably not the best word, but that's what it is. It's a constant going to the mind for all the information instead of slowing down and coming back into the body and checking in. What is my guidance?
Yeah.
What is my knowing? And that is a practice. It's like a spiritual muscle that needs to be flexed, and to trust those intuitive hits that come to you and act on them. It's saboteur to magician. So the saboteur doesn't believe it has time, for example. I never have enough time. The saboteur language to change that would be, I have all the time in the world.
Mm.
And I can create something out of nothing. I can create this. It's about creation. And it's also about what's true. What do we believe is true?
I can relate to this one very heavily. It's really interesting.
Can you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because there's, I've had, it's been a big practice for me to move consciously out of the saboteur, even though I didn't know, I didn't have that language around it. But that sense of there's always something, and for me, it's particularly in regards to my body and my health and things. And even I've just come back from Bali, and there were 3 different situations in Bali where I had to kind of rescue myself from the potential of illness again. And I was just like, there's always something like coming in. So it's really interesting because it did, that pattern then activated my victim, which then activated my warrior. And I can see how this is now all playing out. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. So, and remember, Nerida, too, when the archetype gets activated, all of them start to vibrate and get activated.
Right.
And then that's where that kind of looping and spinning can happen.
Mm.
And it can be really tricky if you're not aware of the archetypal patterns to step out of them. Yeah. And I like to explain it to people like we're always moving and we're dancing in and out of our shadow, because we all have that. And if we can look at it as getting to know that parts of us and go, okay, I see that. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's who I am today.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I see that, and I can make a different choice. And that in turn starts to really help the body instead of collapsing or being too aggressive or being too restricted and contracted. It really starts to give inner movement because we're giving more compassion and understanding to life and to how we're responding and reacting. And so it doesn't, otherwise it becomes like a prison that we can't get out of. Yeah. And we keep running into the 4 walls. And those archetypal patterns are the 4 walls.
Yeah, I love what you just said then, because what I heard was a little bit of a hack out in a sense, which was compassion.
Yes, because if you go into judgment, you're right back into the loop of one of the archetypes.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't smart enough. Oh, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did this again. That's right back into the archetypal pattern of the saboteur, depending on which one. We all have one that's stronger than another.
Yeah, sure.
And it's helpful to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
So you can be aware of that. So we talked about the scarecrow, the lion, and if we look at the Tin Man is the lover. And which I love archetypes, and that of course it would be a Tin Man, right? That's hard, hollow. He needs oil, which is love, lubrication fluid, the feminine. And with the prostitute archetype, it's not about sexuality. Prostitute archetype is about what are we willing to sell out to for safety, love, and security.
Mm.
And that can be sell out our integrity,
Whew.
sell out our voice, sell out our boundaries,
Mm.
sell out like overdoing. Are we staying in relationships that are not healthy because of one of those reasons?
Mm.
And some people stay in a relationship because financially it works, because the prostitute archetype is about money quite
Mm.
a bit, which safety, love, and security come in, right?
Yeah.
Well, I won't have enough money if I leave him or her. And it's different if it's a conscious choice to stay versus pretending that you're staying for another reason other than safety and security.
Yeah.
I think when it's conscious, it changes the energetic imprint of that archetype. And so when you're thinking of your prostitute archetype, if you tend to, one of the things with prostitute is asking everyone else what they think you should do.
Mm.
This was one of my biggest, this
What
is
a
my
great
dominant
indicator.
probably
Mm.
is, and it was my husband that finally said, because I'd studied them for a long time and all these things, like, Christy, you don't need to ask her what she thinks. You choose and you do it your way. And I'm like, oh, I did it again. Because it's so ingrained in my way of thinking and insecurities. And now when I hear my brain say, oh, I need to call her and ask her, I really settle in with that and ask myself, do I need an opinion or do I need to trust myself? Saboteur, right? So
Yeah.
then they all start moving together and the child comes in as the sovereign. If we look at the shadow of the child, the language of the child is, this isn't fair. I don't get my way. A child always has a dream and they never got to fulfill their dream.
Mm.
And so they're searching outside of themselves for that dream. And sometimes child can be really challenging because the wounds of the child can be really deep. And if we haven't done that work required to heal the child within us, the child is the one who drives the bus. The child is the one who shows up to the meeting and shows up to the relationship and shows up to the parenting, not the adult in us. It is our job to see us. It's our job as human beings, adults, to figure out how to resource ourselves and not wait for other people to do it for us. Because a child has to be resourced by a parent or a caregiver. And we as adults coming into our own self-responsibility and alignment is starting to understand what are those needs and how can I meet them. And if there's unprocessed trauma or there's been a lot, it makes it like walking through smoke, right? I don't know. I can't see. I don't know what to do. And that would be child. And then we go from child to sovereign, which is adult. And if the best way I like to think about this is if you have a crown on your head, would a queen or king ask for permission to blank? Because a child's always asking for permission. Well, let me ask my so-and-so. Let me ask them. Let me ask them.
It's like they outsource authority, right?
Yes. And you are your authority. And what does that sound like? And what does it feel like in your body? And this is where somatics come in. If I'm holding my body in a way of a king or queen, that is very different than holding it in a way of no power. And if you start to listen to people, we're always speaking archetypes, and especially these ones. You'll hear people say, oh my God, they're such a child. They're acting like such a child. Oh, they're a victim. And we speak it all the time. So begin to listen so you can learn the language and the nuances of it for yourself, but also noticing it in those around you. That's the best way to begin to learn it.
I love this. It's such powerful work because I think it gives a framework to be able to recognize the expression that is currently moving through at any given point in time, and also the step that can bring you back into a state of greater levels of influence and power within yourself, right? It's to just to move in and out of that. Like you say, it is a dance, right? Because we're always going to be, this is not something that you can escape. You can't escape these archetypes, but we can increase the quality of our relationship to them and start maybe dancing a nicer dance or a more graceful dance rather than chaotic dance.
and a feeling of powerlessness, and that all goes in stages differently for every person. And I think sometimes we can get into comparing stories and comparing the past, and I caution people with that, because no one's lived your life. No one knows what it feels like to be in your body. And the more that we can get to know our own body, our own psyche, our own wisdom, that's where power lies. It's the embodiment of choice.
Amen.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. I think we can talk for hours, and we're going to continue. We're actually going to continue this conversation, moving more into a trauma-informed focus in a minute for some of my private clients, which is super exciting. But to close out this episode for the Enquiry podcast, I would love to know, this is a question that I ask all of my guests. In order for us to take up the mantle of authority and public authority, which is a position that I believe that you hold, I've noticed that there is a piece that we all need to kind of move through in order to allow that in a really resourceful way, and that is like that permission piece around allowing yourself to be fully seen in your life, in your expertise, in your vulnerabilities, etc. Because of course, all of those things are going to come with you, regardless of what you're doing. Yes, they do. What has been your journey through that, and what have you noticed for yourself?
The other day I had another podcast I was on, and so I'm speaking from that to the beginning. I was not nervous at all. I know in my heart that my education, my experience, my intuition matters, and I own those pieces. It's taken me a very long time. I push myself, Nerida, to be uncomfortable, sometimes more than I need to be. But I don't like feeling afraid, because I grew up feeling afraid. And it's something in my system of, okay, then let's try this, then let's do that. Because if I can step into that place for me of fear and do it, there again, it creates more of an opening and space inside of me. And I also remember that my intention on this planet at this time is to share the education that I have as a resource. And it's not about me.
It's not about me. I love it.
That's probably the biggest one. And then I don't get as anxious, but it really isn't about me. I'm here to do my work, whatever that is that I'm doing, and continue to show up and be open to that.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for our conversation today. I know that listeners are going to get so much value out of this. It's a really beautiful framework to be able to look at oneself and to look at what's actually going on, a couple of layers down, which is a much greater point of influence than looking at the stuff that's on the surface. So thank you so much. Where can people find you, and what are you currently passionate about working towards? Where is the invitation piece for people?
Well, I have, my website is christyfoster.co, And I've just created an online face reading course.
Amazing.
That goes through very in-depth modules about how to read a face, how to implement a reading in your work, whatever it is you do. And I'm also creating, almost finished with an archetype course. Amazing. That people can go into and look at the journaling around each archetype and be able to start to do that work on their own so they can become more aware. And that's probably one of my most favorite things, because I think it's the simplest thing, is that doorway into the archetypes and the face, because the face holds the archetypes as well when we're activated. If we've been holding a wound or a trauma for a long time, it shows up in the face. And I also love that the more that we can understand someone's face and where they're coming from, those 4 archetypes that we just talked about, we can have a different understanding about how they communicate to us, how they see the world or not, what's happening internally in them. So you understand more that it's not about you, it's about them and their experience. And it really creates a neutrality that is the gift. Because it's challenging sometimes when you have someone exactly opposite of you, maybe be very aggressive or passive, and you don't understand it. And that's where the face reading is so valuable, because you're not going to get as activated as you understand a face. Yeah. So that's what I have right now.
Beautiful. I love that. All right. So I would highly recommend anybody who's intrigued by this conversation, check Christy out. You're a woman with so much integrity, and I really, really very much appreciate you sharing yourself with us today and the work that you do. Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so that's it from us. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been my pleasure to have you here, and I just want to acknowledge you for spending the time to explore how to have more influence on your own life and be able to create the life that it is that you love. If you'd like to take this work further, you can do so by jumping onto my website at www.neridamills.com/masterclass and join me for my upcoming free 4-week masterclass, Time to Thrive, how to utilize your life as medicine to thrive. That's it from us. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.